In this episode, we move from understanding that a risk exists to the more practical question of what the organization is actually going to do about it, because identifying a problem is only the beginning of good risk work. New learners sometimes imagine that once a risk is documented, the next steps are obvious, but real organizations need someone to help turn concern into an agreed plan that can be funded, assigned, measured, and reviewed. That is where collaboration with risk owners becomes so important, since the risk owner is usually the person who has accountability for the business area, process, service, or decision that could be harmed if the risk becomes real. Developing a risk treatment plan is not about writing a dramatic security memo or inventing a perfect solution. It is about working with the person who owns the exposure so the organization can choose practical actions, understand trade-offs, and move toward a risk level that leadership is willing to live with. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A risk owner is not simply the person who discovered the issue, and it is not automatically the most technical person in the room. The risk owner is generally the person with enough authority and responsibility to make or support decisions about how the organization will respond to the exposure within a specific area of accountability. That might be a department head, a business process leader, an application owner, an operations manager, or another leader tied directly to the affected activity. This matters because risks are usually tied to business consequences, not just technical weaknesses, and the person who owns those consequences must be part of deciding what happens next. A beginner may think the cybersecurity team should simply hand over a recommendation and move on, but mature risk management works through collaboration, not through one-way instruction. The treatment plan becomes meaningful only when the risk owner understands the exposure, accepts their role in decision-making, and helps shape a response that can actually be executed inside the realities of the business. The phrase risk treatment plan can sound formal, but the core idea is straightforward. It is a documented plan describing how the organization intends to address a specific risk, who will do what, when those actions are expected to happen, what resources are needed, and what level of risk is expected to remain afterward. The word treatment does not mean the risk disappears, and that is one of the first misconceptions beginners need to leave behind. Risk treatment is about changing the situation in some deliberate way, whether by reducing the likelihood of an event, reducing the impact if it happens, avoiding the activity that creates the exposure, transferring part of the financial burden, or deciding to accept the remaining exposure within approved limits. The plan exists so the response is not vague or based on good intentions alone. Without a plan, organizations often confuse awareness with action, and that leads to risks sitting on paper while the actual exposure remains unchanged. Collaboration with the risk owner starts with building a shared understanding of the risk itself, because weak plans often grow out of fuzzy problem statements. If the security team talks only about a system weakness, but the risk owner thinks mainly about customer delays or financial loss, the conversation can drift before it even begins. A strong partnership connects the technical condition to the business consequence in clear language, so everyone is reacting to the same issue rather than to separate versions of it. That usually means discussing what could happen, what assets or processes are involved, how likely the event seems under current conditions, and what kind of harm the organization might suffer. It also means clarifying assumptions, because a treatment plan built on unrealistic assumptions will probably fail once work begins. When the risk owner sees the risk in terms that matter to their area of responsibility, collaboration becomes much easier, since the planning discussion is grounded in business impact rather than an abstract security concern. Once the risk is clear, the conversation turns toward possible responses, and this is where the relationship with the risk owner becomes especially important. A cybersecurity professional may instinctively lean toward stronger controls, but the risk owner has visibility into operational constraints, budget limitations, staffing realities, customer commitments, and timing pressures that must be considered. That does not mean security concerns should be diluted. It means a workable plan must recognize both protection needs and business conditions at the same time. If a proposed treatment would interrupt revenue, slow down a critical process, or require resources that are not realistically available, then the plan may look impressive and still fail in practice. Good collaboration helps the team compare different treatment paths honestly instead of pretending there is always one obvious answer. The best plan is not automatically the most aggressive one. It is the one that reduces exposure in a meaningful way while remaining achievable, supportable, and aligned with how the organization actually operates. Developing the plan also requires choosing the shape of the treatment itself, and beginners should understand that treatment is broader than adding technical controls. Sometimes the right move is to redesign a process, add oversight, improve training, change a vendor relationship, reduce the scope of a service, or stop doing an activity that creates more exposure than value. In other cases, the response may include technology, but even then the real treatment plan is not the tool itself. It is the larger set of actions and accountabilities that make the response real and sustainable. Collaboration helps uncover options that a purely technical review might miss. A risk owner may know that a policy change would be effective, or that a process can be simplified to reduce human error, or that an operational checkpoint could prevent a known failure pattern. When risk professionals and risk owners think together, the plan becomes more balanced and often more effective because it addresses the real source of the exposure rather than only its most visible symptom. A useful treatment plan needs clear actions, and clear actions come from specificity rather than broad promises. One of the most common weaknesses in early risk work is language that sounds serious but does not tell anyone what will actually happen. Statements about improving security, strengthening oversight, or enhancing resilience may sound good, but they do not create accountability unless they are tied to defined work. Collaboration with the risk owner helps turn general intent into concrete steps that can be assigned, tracked, and reviewed. That might include revising a process, updating access decisions, improving review cycles, separating responsibilities, adjusting vendor expectations, or scheduling a redesign effort. The point is not to create excessive detail for its own sake. The point is to make the plan real enough that people understand what they are responsible for and how progress will be recognized. A treatment plan that cannot be translated into action is really just a statement of concern, and concern alone does not change risk. Ownership and accountability need to be visible inside the plan, because work tends to stall when everyone assumes someone else will move first. The risk owner remains accountable for the risk decision, but that does not mean the risk owner performs every treatment activity personally. In most cases, several people or teams will carry out different parts of the work, and collaboration is what connects those responsibilities into one coherent plan. A manager may approve funding, an operations team may adjust a process, a technical team may implement a safeguard, and a governance function may review whether the work meets expectations. If these relationships are not discussed openly, the plan can become fragmented very quickly. Beginners sometimes confuse accountability with assignment, but they are not the same thing. Assignment tells us who performs a task, while accountability tells us who is responsible for making sure the overall risk is being addressed appropriately. A strong treatment plan makes those distinctions easier to see, which reduces confusion and supports follow-through. Time also matters, because risk treatment is rarely instantaneous. Collaboration with the risk owner helps determine whether the response must happen urgently, gradually, or in phases based on business priorities and the seriousness of the exposure. Some risks require immediate temporary action, while a more durable fix is planned later. Others can be addressed during a normal improvement cycle if the current exposure remains within acceptable bounds. The treatment plan should reflect those timing realities instead of pretending every issue can be solved at once. Deadlines should be meaningful and tied to the nature of the risk, not chosen arbitrarily to make the document look disciplined. The risk owner is essential here because timing decisions often involve business calendars, operational dependencies, contract cycles, customer impact, and change windows. A plan with unrealistic deadlines encourages quiet failure, while a plan with no deadlines encourages drift. Collaboration helps establish timing that is serious enough to drive action and realistic enough to be honored. Resources are another area where good collaboration protects the plan from becoming unrealistic. Treating risk almost always consumes something valuable, whether that is money, staff time, leadership attention, vendor support, process redesign effort, or reduced flexibility in how work is performed. A beginner may focus only on the cost of a new safeguard, but the true cost of treatment is often broader than the purchase of a product or service. It may include training, maintenance, change management, documentation updates, ongoing review, and the impact on people who must work differently afterward. The risk owner usually has better visibility into these practical limits than anyone else involved in the discussion. By collaborating early, the team can avoid producing a plan that looks excellent in theory but was never resourced honestly. This does not mean risk treatment should be weakened whenever resources are tight. It means the plan should openly account for what is required, so decision-makers can judge whether the organization is truly prepared to carry it out or whether another treatment path needs to be considered. An important part of developing treatment plans is discussing residual risk, which is the risk that remains after the planned actions are completed. Residual risk matters because almost no treatment eliminates uncertainty completely, and mature risk management depends on being honest about what will still be true after the work is done. Beginners sometimes assume that if a plan is approved, the problem is effectively solved, but that mindset can create false confidence. Collaboration with the risk owner helps everyone understand that treatment changes the exposure. It does not guarantee perfect safety. This discussion also helps prevent disappointment later, because leaders can see from the start whether the proposed actions are expected to reduce likelihood, reduce impact, improve recovery, or simply create enough improvement to bring the exposure within acceptable limits. A treatment plan is stronger when it clearly reflects the expected end state. That way, the organization is not approving activity blindly, but is choosing a known target for the level of risk it expects to carry after treatment. Documentation and approval are sometimes treated like administrative chores, but they are part of what makes the plan trustworthy. When a treatment plan is written clearly, reviewed by the right people, and connected to formal decision-making, it becomes easier to track progress, explain rationale, and demonstrate that the organization handled the issue deliberately. Good documentation should capture the nature of the risk, the chosen response, the main actions, responsibilities, timing, assumptions, and any important constraints or dependencies. It should also show where the risk owner's agreement fits into the process, because collaboration means more than attendance at a meeting. It means active participation in shaping and supporting the response. This written record becomes valuable later when questions arise about why the organization took a certain path or why some exposure remained. For new learners, it is helpful to see documentation not as paperwork for its own sake, but as evidence that the treatment decision was thoughtful, accountable, and tied to governance rather than to informal conversation. Even a well-developed treatment plan should not be viewed as fixed forever, because conditions change and risk management has to stay connected to reality. A new dependency may appear, a plan control may prove harder to maintain than expected, business priorities may shift, or the threat environment may change enough to alter the value of the original plan. Collaboration with the risk owner continues after the plan is written because progress, obstacles, and new information must be discussed honestly. This does not mean constant reinvention. It means the plan should be reviewed often enough to confirm that the actions still make sense and that the expected reduction in exposure is still plausible. If delays occur or assumptions turn out to be weak, the organization may need to adjust timelines, add interim measures, or revisit the treatment decision itself. The strongest plans are not the ones that never change. They are the ones that remain connected to current conditions while preserving clear accountability and a disciplined approach to decision-making. There is also a people side to this work that beginners should take seriously, because collaboration succeeds or fails partly through trust. Risk owners may resist planning if they feel they are being blamed, cornered, or handed an impossible burden. They may also disengage if the conversation feels too technical, too abstract, or disconnected from business reality. A seasoned risk professional builds trust by explaining clearly, listening carefully, and respecting the fact that the risk owner has legitimate concerns beyond security alone. That does not mean avoiding hard truths or softening every recommendation. It means presenting the issue in a way that invites responsible ownership instead of defensive avoidance. When the relationship is strong, the treatment plan tends to be better because more useful information is shared early, trade-offs are discussed honestly, and the chosen path is more likely to gain support across the affected area. Collaboration is not an optional extra around the plan. It is one of the main reasons the plan has a chance of succeeding once real work begins. As you put all of this together, the central idea becomes clear. Collaborating with risk owners to develop risk treatment plans means turning risk analysis into practical action through shared understanding, defined responsibility, realistic timing, honest discussion of trade-offs, and a clear view of what risk will remain after treatment. The risk professional brings structure, analysis, and perspective, while the risk owner brings business context, authority, and accountability for the affected area. When those roles work together well, the organization is much more likely to produce a treatment plan that is not just well-written, but actually executable. That is the standard worth aiming for in mature risk management. For someone new to this topic, the most important takeaway is that good treatment planning is not about producing a perfect document. It is about helping the right people agree on meaningful actions that reduce exposure in a way the business can understand, support, and sustain over time.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.